Welcome to my video about creating OER for diverse learners using Universal Design for Learning called UDL. My name is Charity Davenport. I'm an English as a Second Language instructor at the University of Tennessee and also a graduate student in UT's Instructional Technology program. Both OER and UDL are very important topics to me, so I wanted to share some ways to embed UDL into OER authoring and adapting. First, we should talk about what Universal Design for Learning means. UDL originated from universal design. This is a principle in the design of buildings, products, and environments to benefit and be accessible to everyone. One of the most well-known examples of universal design is the curb cut. Many people know that the curb cut has been built into sidewalks as a form of accessibility for those in wheelchairs. But think about all the other people who benefit from this kind of curb. The mother taking her baby for a walk in her stroller, the bicyclist, the blind person with a cane, the runner. Universal Design for Learning is the same, keeping accessibility in mind as it will benefit all learners. UDL goes beyond using assistive technology and offers guidelines for making the whole learning experience accessible through design. When we talk about universal design for learning, we want to design materials that can be accessible, relevant, and engaging to all learners. Learners have identities that affect how they learn. It is important to use UDL guidelines to make learning more inclusive of all types of learners. In this chart here, we can see the different aspects of people's identities that we should take into consideration. In this video, we will especially focus on using UDL in OER to make learning more accessible regarding physical abilities, mental and cognitive abilities, gender, race and ethnicity, sexual orientation and identity, non-native English speakers, age, education, and work background. In this video, I'm going to refer to OER as defined by David Wiley, so I am particularly focusing on OER that use Creative Commons licenses. But UDL guidelines can be extended to openly and freely accessible software and programs as well. It is important that OER be editable so that others can adapt the OER to their needs and make it more accessible to their student population. So it should have a Creative Commons license that allows for adaptation, and it should be available in formats where editing is easy and affordable. OER should be authored with accessibility and UDL in mind, but it is also important that OER materials be adaptable as well. The UDL guidelines were created by CAST and are based on neuroscience research, tapping into 3 networks in the brain for learning: affective networks, recognition networks, and strategic networks. I will not be looking at each of these many guidelines, but instead give strategies for OER design, creation, and adaptation that are connected to some of the UDL guidelines, particularly regarding providing multiple means of representation and improving access. So let's get started. First, it is important as you're creating OER materials to make them available in multiple formats, especially formats other than PDF. Many PDFs, especially if they are scans of paper text, cannot be converted to text using OCR, which is optical character recognition, which is vital to accessibility by screen readers. By allowing OER materials to be downloadable in different formats, you give the learner and other users the ability to more easily edit the document, search for text, use Immersive Reader, keep a copy of the OER, and print them out. It's important that there still be an option to download a copy for offline use and for printing. This is especially important for students who may not have stable internet connectivity. By making OER materials available in Word, learners can take advantage of Immersive Reader software built into Microsoft Word, available in both the application and the online version. In Immersive Reader, learners can use text-to-speech to hear the text. This includes changing the speed and choice of a male or female voice, change the color of the background and text for better readability, change the text size and increase the spacing, separate words into syllables, focus on one or only a few lines of text at a time, label parts of speech, and use a picture dictionary and translator. Immersive Reader may also be a feature in other platforms as well, such as Wakelet and the Canvas LMS. Along the same vein, it's important to provide multiple means of representation in OER materials. This means not only having text, but multimedia, including audio, video, images, and accessible interactive elements. Just as it's important to have text-to-speech options for text, it's important to have captions and transcripts for audio and video elements too. Microsoft Office products have built-in accessibility checkers to guide you through the process of making sure your OER materials are accessible. The next is providing multiple means of engagement by varying activities and sources of information so that they can be personalized and contextualized to learners' lives, culturally relevant and responsive, socially relevant, age and ability appropriate, appropriate for different racial, cultural, ethnic, and gender groups. OER should be written keeping inclusivity in mind. Make sure that OER is free of bias in religion, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. Also, avoid using idioms, slang, and cultural references that might be unfamiliar to non-native speakers. If you feel that these items are vital to the materials, make sure you give a link to an explanation so that learners can feel more included regarding these references. It's also important to keep this guideline in mind when adapting OER to learners' needs. Most of the guidelines for OER that I have addressed are good for creating and adapting OER textbooks and other content material, but many UDL guidelines apply to other kinds of OER materials. For example, when creating lesson plans or assessments to go along with OER content, try to give a variety of assessment options for students, and try to have more authentic assessments of learning. Multiple choice, true-false, and matching type questions are good for low-stakes knowledge checks and formative assessments, but have more authentic, project-based, high-impact assessments for engaging students in practice and as summative assessments. Allowing time for reflection of learning is also important. When creating OER courses and modules, think of ways to allow learners options, like choosing which module they want to tackle first, rather than just linear courses. Also, try to find ways for different learning pathways for students as they go through and master the materials. Chunking content into bite-sized pieces help prevent cognitive overload and promote understanding. Lastly, it's important to build in strategies for self-regulated learning, such as time management, into OER course materials. Imagine a student on the bus who wants to study their OER class materials but is unable to read well while the bus is in motion. If that OER is designed with accessibility and UDL in mind, they could listen to the text on their phone. Another student wants to watch a video for class, but their environment is so noisy they can't hear clearly and need to read captions instead. Another student who is a refugee is learning more English day by day thanks to OER with built-in dictionaries and translators. Sometimes accessibility is not at the forefront of OER authors' thoughts because they don't expect many of their users to have a disability that requires these accessibility features. But what UDL means is that these features benefit everyone, not just those with specific needs. Thank you for watching the video. There are so many helpful guidelines in UDL that can help authors design amazing OER materials. Please check out the additional resources at the end of this video to find the CAST website for more information on all the UDL guidelines.